To the undocumented community, to the affected community, to see how they feel.
A pivotal Supreme Court decision on immigration. And another coming on health care. Both could shake up Washington.
What vision are we going to stand up for? Who are we going to fight for?
There is much more that unites us than there is that divides us.
And the race for president. I'm Megan Lieberman, live from the New York Times newsroom. Yesterday, Romney spokesman Rick Gorka had a long and testy exchange with reporters about the Supreme Court decision on Arizona's immigration law. Here's a sample.
Does he have a reaction as to whether he agrees with this decision?
Yeah.
So
the states have the right to craft their immigration policy when the federal government has failed to do so. Let's say it again and again and again for you. The governor understands that states have their own right to craft policies to secure their own borders and to address illegal immigration.
I'm joined now by Michael Barbaro, who covers the Romney campaign. So, Michael, the Romney campaign really seemed like they didn't want to talk about this yesterday, didn't they?
No, this very expensive private plane was chartered for the specific purpose of having reporters around when the Supreme Court announced its big healthcare decision, basically rendered a verdict on Obamacare. That didn't happen yesterday. You can see the Romney people, just their frustration with the court for doing things out of the order that they wish they'd done them. And I mean, when Mitt Romney's presented with the issue of immigration, it brings up all the sort of messy history of his quest to have illegal or undocumented workers self-deport, the fact that he wants to veto the DREAM Act. He doesn't want to talk about that. He wants to win over as many Hispanic, Latin voters as possible. This is just bad news for him. He wants to talk about Obamacare and Obamacare alone.
Right. It seems unclear where they're trying to go with the immigration issue, though. Last week, they really seemed like they were trying to soften their tone, like he was trying to have a sort of more welcoming visage before the Hispanic elected leaders. Yesterday, he didn't speak directly to reporters at all. At a fundraiser, he just said he would have rather see the court give the states more latitude on immigration, not less. What are they trying to accomplish here?
Well, what they're trying to accomplish, number one, is to not violate their own cardinal rule in his campaign, which is to flip-flop, which is to change positions. And Governor Romney was quite...
Not to flip-flop.
To not flip-flop. Right. Yeah, the number one rule in the Romney campaign these days is don't say anything that contravenes what he said in the past, because it's a narrative that they despise, that he's a flip-flopper. And in the past, Governor Romney's done a couple of things. He said that the DREAM Act, which provides a path to citizenship for folks who were born here, should be vetoed. And he's been really strident on that, and said people should self-deport. Anytime this issue comes up, people are going to be reminded of that. So if he suddenly says that the Arizona rule was wrong, then why did he say that these other things should be done in the past? So it's just a situation where if he can talk about principles like states' rights and the failure of the Obama administration to come up with comprehensive immigration reform, that's a winner. But to get involved in the granular details is bad.
Right. Now, the president, of course, seemed only too happy to talk about this yesterday, and he was talking about using all the federal resources to protect civil rights and how no one should be under a cloud of suspicion because of what they look like, which, of course, is a very powerful statement coming from an African-American president.
First black president, that's correct.
Right.
Yeah, it's a real winning issue for the White House because it's worth thinking of the two issues and the two constituencies, gay voters, Hispanic, Latin voters, both have been activated and animated by this White House with particular pieces of either legislation or gestures from this White House. They are much more likely now to come out and vote for Barack Obama. He wants to keep hitting them, keep pressing those buttons with that constituency, whereas Governor Romney, in both cases, doesn't want to talk about those issues if he can avoid it. He'd rather espouse broad issues that appeal to Republican base, such as states' rights, family values. A lot more coding in the way Governor Romney wants to talk about that kind of an issue than President Obama, who wants to very particularly remind people of what he's done for them.
Right. It also just seemed like the Romney campaign is just trying to run out the clock on this and just stall until the Supreme Court rules later this week on health care, because they think that's a much bigger winner for them, really, no matter what the court does, certainly even more so probably if the court overrules the law and says, basically he can say, you spent 2 years wasting the country's time.
And they might be right in the sense that the way that the news coverage of the Obama health care decision from the court will be enormous. It will be days, if not weeks, of nonstop pondering of what it means for healthcare, for politics, for everything. Whereas I think, and because we know the time frame, this will be decided in 2 days, that it will eclipse this immigration decision. It just will. And so the governor's waiting for that. And once that is eclipsed, he won't have to talk about immigration for weeks, if not months.
Right, but he's not really going to be able to run out the clock until November. They are going to have to find some kind of happy medium for them on this issue before Election Day, aren't they?
They probably are, but and the number one place where it's going to come up is during the debates, and I bet you're going to see a little more movement from Governor Romney on this issue. But so far, he has doubled down on a position that is resolutely, not flip-flopping, which is to say, I said this in the past, I don't want to say something different in the future, so I'm going to keep it kind of vague and in the middle.
Thanks, Michael.
My pleasure.
In Arizona, our Phoenix bureau chief assessed the local reaction to Arizona's immigration ruling.
This is Fernanda Santos of the New York Times. I spent the day yesterday talking to Arizonans about the impact of the immigration ruling here in Phoenix. Both sides were well represented. For instance, I heard Governor Jen Brewer claim victory on behalf of the upheld portion of the law.
Arizona did not ask for this fight, nor did it seek out the task of having to confront illegal immigration. We cannot forget that we are here today because the federal government has failed the American people regarding immigration policy.
I also talked with Arizonans of Hispanic descent, some of them born here, some of them legal immigrants, and others who were not. While their circumstances differed, many had the same concerns. Honorio Hernandez, pictured here, is a legal resident. He said he expected continued scrutiny because of the way he looks, echoing the sentiments of many with whom I spoke. It's still too early to tell how the striking down of one part of the law and the upholding of another will play out, but one thing seems clear. Both sides do not expect the conflict to go away anytime soon.
We know the eyes of the world will be upon us. We know the critics will be watching and waiting.
Turning now to healthcare, I'm joined by Katie Thomas, who's been looking at what the Supreme Court decision later this week might mean for consumers. So, Katie, even if the law is overturned either entirely or partially, that doesn't necessarily mean that everything that's been set in motion suddenly comes to a grinding halt, does it?
Right. I mean, it's really unclear. Remember, there's a lot of different moving parts. We don't know what Congress is going to do. We don't know what insurers will do. We don't know what employers will do. That said, there are some provisions of the bill that are pretty popular, including one that requires coverage of kids who are under 26, and those will likely stay in some way. Also, states could act on their own to return some of this, for example, enacting their own mandate.
Right. Now, some big insurers like United Healthcare have said that they are going to keep some of these popular provisions, like being allowed to keep your children under your insurance until they're 26, or removing the lifetime cap on benefits, no matter what the court does. A, do we think that's really going to happen? And B, do we think that other insurers might follow them in that path?
Yeah, that's entirely possible, yes. A couple things to keep in mind. One is, remember that it's the employers that actually make a lot of these decisions in these cases. So not always the insurer. And we don't know what they'll decide if the law obviously were to be overturned. And then the other thing is that the insurer could also offer a number of different plans, some that would include these provisions and then some that did not. And perhaps those that did not would also cost less money.
Right. So they'll offer the extra provisions, but you actually have to pay more. So it's not quite the same thing as if the law were in place.
That's possible, right.
There's also been some experts who said that even if the law is overturned, even if the individual mandate is overturned, that there still are a lot of people who are not currently insured who might still get insurance. Why would that be the case?
Right, okay. Again, this isn't one of the other things it's unclear and we don't exactly know what's going to happen. I mean, the basic concept is that, in order for insurers to pay for some of these more expensive provisions of the bill, you need a lot of more healthy people who are on the rolls. And so that is what the mandate was supposed to be for. If the mandate's overturned, there's some other provisions of the bill that also add people to the rolls. One of them is Medicaid expansion, which is just going to add more people who would be covered by Medicaid. Subsidies for low-income families, tax credits for small employers. So some people think that will offset the loss of the mandate, and others say it's not going to be enough.
Right. Now, what about some of these provisions that have not gone into effect yet, like the coverage for people with pre-existing conditions, or the sort of ban on charging sick people more than people who are healthier? Do those just go away if this gets overturned?
Probably, yeah. If it's overturned, that's likely, and also if just the insurance provisions are overturned, that's also likely.
And finally, if you were a person who had insurance, was reasonably happy with your insurance already, does it matter to you what the Supreme Court does this week?
Yeah, I mean there are some provisions that also affect people who are already insured. You know, one example is that it covers it doesn't require a copayment for preventative services like cancer screenings. Another thing is that it bans lifetime limits on benefits.
So those things are things that people, even if they're insured, might care about.
Yeah, those are on the line, right?
Thanks, Katie.
Okay, thank you.
Before we go, here in New York City, 21-term Congressman Charlie Rangel is facing a tough primary challenge. He voted in Harlem this morning.
We're going to win this one because it's the right thing to do.
That's all for today. Stay with us online for the results of Mr. Rangel's primary, and of course, for more on the Supreme Court's upcoming healthcare decision. I'm Megan Lieberman. Thanks for watching.